Hi, 7th graders. This is Ms. Dohan. I'm here to talk to you again about conclusion paragraphs. So before we get started, to make sure that you're ready to go, please get out two things. First, get out your notes on conclusion paragraphs. It's on the salmon pink colored sheet. The intro paragraph notes are on the other side. And also get out your outline for this paper. So please pause this video until you have both of those things. Okay, so we're going to talk about conclusion paragraphs. Conclusion paragraphs, the goal of a conclusion paragraph is to wrap up the ideas in your entire essay. The goal of a concluding sentence is to wrap up your idea in one small chunk or one small paragraph. So a conclusion paragraph has three main parts in order to really wrap up an entire essay. You have the restatement of the thesis, you have the link back to the hook, and you have the so what. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each one, just like I did with introductory paragraphs. So first we have the restatement of the thesis. And the goal of the restatement of the thesis is to remind your audience right off the bat, here's the main points that I've just been talking to you for the past three paragraphs. Some strategies that you can use. You should start with a summary transition. And I'll give you a couple options. Definitely restate your main points. Restate all of your main points. Do not use the same wording, but rather use synonyms. And don't be afraid to switch the order or even chunk up your main points into multiple sentences. So again, a little bit more depth into the do's. Do start when you're restating your thesis. Do start with the transition to signal like that you're ending overall. So some of my kind of go-to transitions for when I restate my thesis are overall, because again that shows your entire essay ideas overall, as demonstrated, or all in all. So those are three good choices for starting your restatement of the thesis. Do, and this one's a really, really important one. Sometimes I notice in past essays that when we get to the restatement, we might only restate one or two ideas, and in this case we have like a couple of points that we need to restate. So make sure that your restatement of your thesis includes the character, the three choices he or she makes, and mention that these choices have an impact on Paul. Two more things to do for your restatement. Do, again, use synonyms and change around the wording. Last but not least, do not be afraid to use more than one sentence to kind of restate your ideas. Maybe you might restate the character and his or her choices in one sentence and then talk about the impacts on Paul in another. So some concise or short do nots. Do not copy and paste your thesis, and don't, in other words, forget to include one of these points. So don't only include one or two main points. The next thing that we're going to talk about in our conclusion paragraphs is the link back to the hook. And the link back to the hook, the goal is to build this feeling that your ideas are really, really thoroughly planned out, and then everything's kind of coming to a closure in a full circle way. I have some strategies for you to directly refer back to your hook with both the question and the quote strategy, because in looking at a lot of your work, I don't think anybody chose the anecdote. But you can still use this strategy to refer back to your anecdote. So depending on which strategy you chose, a question or a quote, some of these strategies, you'll want to use some of these strategies. So first, for quotes, I did this on an earlier cast. For quotes, you're going to want to directly refer back to the person or kind of the words that you use to start off your essay. So I've got some sentence starters for you to choose from to kind of help you with that. So you might start off with like, as blank's quote teaches, or as blank's words emphasize, or even just that person, as blank reveals. So what that might look like is if you maybe had a quote by Thomas Jefferson that says like, independence is the hallmark of American society, or something like that. When you're referring back to your hook in your conclusion paragraph, you might say, as Thomas Jefferson's like words teach us, and so on and so forth. This is an introductory kind of phrase, so you'll want to use a comma to set that off. Okay. I would, if I were you, write some of these down so that you are good to go when you are writing your link back to your hook. So another strategy that we have is we also have when you answer a question or when you ask a question as your hook. So with questions, to kind of link back to your hook, you're going to answer your big picture question by connecting it to a related life message presented in the author's story. And I know that that's a mouthful, and I'm going to try to break it down in a second. So the first thing that you need to check is you need to check that your hook is a big picture idea or big picture question. So remember, it's not one of those like yes or no questions like, has your brother ever picked on you? Rather, you want to have like an open-ended questions like, what does it mean to be a good friend? Or what does it mean to be a good brother or parent or something like that? So first, check to see that you have a big picture question. So once I've got my big picture question that's related to the topic, I'm going to answer it and to link it back to the hook. So one thing that you might start off with, or a sentence starter that you might start off with, is, as Edward Bloor's story shows, and that should be a shows, and I'm going to fix that right now. Ooh, shoot. It should be a shows. Sorry. As Edward Bloor's story shows, true friendship means being there and supporting each other during the tough times. So I've got this big picture question as my hook, and I'm in my link back to your hook, I'm linking the story to this kind of big picture idea. In other words, I'm moving out from like the specifics of the story to information that my audience should get to know and should take away from this essay. The last part of the conclusion paragraph is the so what. And again, this is the last part of your essay, and the goal is to explain the real world significance of your info to your audience. So the question that you want to ask yourself is, what's important for my audience to take away from the topic of this essay? And again, your hook and the link back to the hook should be related to the topic of this essay. And the topic of this essay is about how choices and consequences like affect another person. So in other words, it should all be related to this idea of choices and consequences affecting each other. So I've actually kind of listed out some specific guiding questions that relate to this topic to help you with the so what and to help you kind of teach your reader something and tell them something to take away from this essay beyond just, oh, Tangerine sounds like a really messed up book. Man, that Eric, he's something. So some guiding questions for the so what. First, what do you want your audience to understand about how choices and consequences can impact others? So again, this is not in relation to the story. This is now thinking of the real world significance to your audience. What do you want people to know about how choices can impact each other? Another question. If our choices can impact others, what does that mean about how people should treat each other? So again, answering these questions kind of in general will give your audience something that they can do in their own lives, or a way to think or a way to act in their own lives. And lastly, if choices and consequences can impact others, what does that mean about how people should act? So these three questions try to guide you to take the topic and connect it to your audience's kind of just daily life. You want to leave your audience at the very end of your story, not totally dwelling on the specifics of the characters and details in Tangerine, but rather something that they can take and use in your own life. So I hope that this has helped you break down the three parts of a conclusion paragraph. Good luck drafting.